Okay. Okay, so I'll try and summarize the work that we did in the air quality and health group. Um, we talked about a lot of things. We have a lot of different sticky notes, so I'm not going to go into the detail on all these. These will be available for people to view and look at after the workshop, but I kind of wanted to highlight some of the main themes that we looked at across when evaluating each of these questions. So we took the 4 questions we were kind of tasked with and then had tried to have everybody contribute to, okay, what is our interest, or what do we have to add from an air quality and health perspective. So for the first one, the main achievements from UCAR, NCAR, and the African community in terms of African environment related research. There's been a number of collaborations and proposals. So the UCAR Africa Initiative obviously has been one. There's the proposed aircraft campaign, NSF NERC, which is going to be over East Africa if it gets funded. That a number of people here, both locally in Africa and then also that are part of the UCAR Africa Initiative, are looking to get done. We also highlighted some publications. So the writing of the Kigali Declaration as an outcome from WRCP was a big step forwards, advocating for African science and African research. There's also HEI reports and the state of global air. There's been a couple different papers focused on the need for research in Africa, and we think that was all kind of valid efforts to undergo. And then in terms of modeling and observation, while we know that data is pretty sparse in Africa, there are a number of ongoing efforts within Africa that we wanted to highlight here. I'm not going to go through each one, but it's important to note that we do have either currently operational or ongoing air quality observations in Africa. Moving on, we spent the most time on these 2 questions, question number 2 and 3, where question number 2 is, what is the urgent environmental questions, issues in Africa that our group has to be addressed? And so we really treated this as what are research questions or research outcomes that we're interested in from the scope of air quality and health. And so the overall themes that we've kind of been able to sort these two into are policy related themes. So anything like exploring environmental justice and equity, or exploring kind of mitigation efforts or policies that are targeting air quality research. All of those fit into that category. The next one is research funding, culture, and communication. There's a number of outcomes that we would really like to see along that space. So a shift in air quality research in a more equitable manner. So not just focused on cities, but also focused on rural areas. Kind of review studies focused on air quality and health. And then kind of the next major theme that we had was kind of health, environmental outcomes, and impacts. So what is the health and economic burden of air quality in Africa? That's a big unanswered questions. There's a number of reports that have values for this, but how certain are they? And how do they take into account shifting or growing populations, a myriad of different impacts that we know aren't accounted for in emissions factors or in exposure science. And then we also wanted to highlight the inequitable impacts of air quality and health on women and children in Africa. We think that that's a kind of a key research theme that I think we need to investigate more. And then next we have the observations and modeling. This is really a kind of a large challenge in Africa, as has been pointed out many times when we're looking at air quality. There's a lack of observational data. So here we've tried to highlight some specific science questions focused on that. So how do we maintain accuracy and uptime of ongoing observations? How can we increase the number of sensors and the spatial coverage of air quality networks in Africa, and things like that. And then tied to this, we also had source attribution. And so for the sake of time, I won't go through this. We actually had two different slides on question 2. But as I said, these will all be available after. But to give the other groups time, I want to go through onto question 3, where what are the obstacles addressing these issues and what resources support do we need to overcome these obstacles? So kind of the interaction between communication and policy. So researchers to policymakers, policymakers to researchers. There's a number of challenges in that communication that really inhibits impactful research. And then this includes the lack of information going to stakeholders themselves. There's a number of obstacles in kind of the research funding and culture of data sharing that we highlighted here. Obviously, the funding environment for research in Africa has been highlighted as being very sparse. I think it was 3.8% of climate research is going to Africa. It's probably even smaller than that for air quality research. Observations and modeling. We also had a number of different things related to that. So the lack of data availability. We either, one, don't have a lot of observations, or two, they're not being shared. They are ongoing observations, but they're not being shared between different groups, specifically between the government, governments of different countries in Africa, or between the government and stakeholders, or between the government and researchers. So there needs to be a data sharing protocol in place that we can point to that allows for investigations into air quality and health. And then we also highlighted kind of the phase out of wharf chem, what's replacing it, and how do we address that in Africa? Right now, that's probably the most accessible tool in Africa, but moving forward, we know we're not going to get wharf results. It's going to transition to MPAS. At what point do we want to address this in Africa? Do we want to start using MPAS now, or do we want to go with a more developed model of wharf chem for these kind of research questions? And then the other major obstacle that we've highlighted is basically the political landscape and the public perception of health and air quality and links in Africa. And what I mean by this is in Africa, you can see when somebody is starving. You can see when somebody has an infectious disease. You can't see when somebody's developing COPD due to chronic exposure to air quality. So it's not as visual of a problem. And that kind of creates a challenge when we're looking at funding sources. So how do we frame this in a light as this being one of the largest health challenges that Africa is facing? And I think that there needs to be some work done on that. And then finally, how do we contribute? What is the role of UCAR and the international community in accelerating environmentally sustainable solutions in Africa? Technology and knowledge sharing is a key one. We really need to have that technology and knowledge transfer from the global north to the global south. And we also need to be able to do it in a manner that it is equitable and that it remains there and remains in place. We don't want to do parachute science. We need to be able to build up the capacity of local researchers or become available to them on a more frequent basis. There's a lot of work that can be done in kind of communication and lobbying with policymakers. So we can identify different sectors that are really impactful on air quality and health. So transportation. But how do we communicate that to policymakers? How do we get them to implement cleaner cars? Or how do we stop the global north from importing basically excess cars that don't have the standards that we have in the global north? Basically, they get transitioned to Africa or other developing countries. How do we stop that process? How do we have a more sustainable transfer of technology? And again, like, what's the role of NCAR, UCAR, and the international community? That one's very much more on the international community. How do we do that? In terms of data, we can be more open about providing data, about sharing data. about having it accessible to stakeholders within the countries. I mean, we develop all these websites and things for data access, but transferring 20 gigabytes of data to Africa is a challenge. I mean, it's not something that we can just do right away. So we need to be able to allow for an environment that makes it easier to get data to African scientists or African policy or African stakeholders. So you don't need to, often they don't have a computer, so we need mobile-based solutions or things like that that can be shown on a phone and things like that. And then we did highlight that kind of the workshops that we're facilitating are impactful, but there does need to be a more continuous transfer of that knowledge. Like a 2-day or a week-long workshop may seem impactful at the time, and I think it is impactful, but maintaining those relationships is key. So we need to do more work in maintaining those relationships after workshops and really helping develop some of these situations. I think I'm out of time. But I think that's all we had too. So I will transfer it to whatever's next alphabetically. Climate. So Isla.
So good morning once again. I'll be a slide, so I'm not sharing anything. So after this discussion, we'll upload the summary to the drive. So we had a total of 16 participants, 7 in person and 9 were online. And we had a lot of meaningful discussions and deliberation. So for the question 1, what are the main achievements of UCAR, ENCA, and the community so far in terms of African environmental related research? So one of the things we highlighted is there has been strong connections to African scientists through training and visit to ENCA. So an example of this is WAF training that has been going on over the years. Also, there has been numerous research, which are mainly out of curiosity, hypothesis-based and answering questions. For example, a lot of studies have been done looking at the impact of Africa easterly wave on Atlantic tropical cyclone development. A lot of studies have looked at the impact of the Saharan dust, land vegetation dynamics, and also numerous decadal prediction efforts. So we strongly believe that all these numerous research activities has contributed to the scientific understanding and development over the region. So we also discussed about the Mesoamerican group, which is currently ongoing. So for example, their grid and also their simulation extend over West Africa. And we believe these huge data sets will be beneficial to the region in terms of our research and also understanding processes. So main question is raised regarding the climate model, not just the global model, but regional model, that the available model we have are not developed in Africa, or perhaps for Africa usage. So the question is that, is there a way that we can fine tune this model so that it can have a better representation of regional and local future, especially in the climate perspective? So the general response we had to that is, so currently both global and regional model are not tuned for regional specific purposes. So, and also overall, there's also need for observational benchmarking, which is a critical issue over the continent. So lastly on here about the achievement has to do with organization of training sessions. For example, the CSM workshop that was done at in Kigali during the last WCRP workshops. But one of the bottleneck of these training activity has been the availability of computing resources over the region. So I move to the question 2. What are the urgent environmental question and issue in Africa for for our group to be addressed? So the first here is that up until now, very little has been done on the potential impact of sea level rise over the continent. So, and unanimously, we believe that there should be more advances in research in this area. The second thing is also, numerous studies have shown that under global warming, the frequency of extreme will intensify. So, and also we've been seeing that realistically over the continent, where flooding is now a yearly thing. And also there are some regions, for example, South Africa is becoming more susceptible to drought. So we emphasize the need for improved subseasonal to seasonal predictions, early warning system, and also improvement in the climate projections overall. And we believe these are critical because the entire continent depends on rain-fed agriculture, and also the power is also mostly driven by hydroelectric power generations. So these improvements in seasonal prediction, early warning system, and climate projection will be strongly beneficial. Also here has to do with the development, particularly urban development. So as a result of increasing population, in fact, studies have shown that the entire African population is going to reach about 3 billion in maybe 20 to 30 years time. So, and there has been increasing gentrification, people moving to the urban city. So which directly has impact on the land use and relating to the land surface temperature, increasing intensity of an heat island. So more needs to be done on urban modeling over the continent. Now, question 3, what are the obstacles addressing these issues and the resources and support that is needed to overcome these obstacles? So one of the main obstacles has to do with monitoring, having observation and in situ measurement. So, and we discussed this extensively because, of course, the region is there with the sparsity of in situ measurement and also quality observations. So another question is raised how do we use this in situ observation to evaluate model? Because generally the practice now within the scientific community is to regrade both observation and the model to the same resolution and do comparison. So when you have point stations, how do you use that for model evaluation? So maybe during the discussions, we can talk more on that. So the second thing here, which also I've highlighted earlier, is that the available climate model and the regional model are not doing the best of job in the representation of the local or the dynamic futures over the continent. So then we had a series of deliberation that there has been a lot of numerous evaluation process-based paper that has been published, highlighting the deficiency of this model, whether to capture the circulation features like the jet streams or the thermodynamics features like the moisture. Are these biases, are they being factored in model development for potential improvements? And luckily we had in our group, one of the renowned experts in model development And the conclusion is the improvement from series of versions of the global model and regional model is largely reliant on using tracking algorithms to look at storms, and also basing the belief on improvement on input driving data set like ERA5. Assuming that, okay, ERA5 is able to capture the circulation features over the region, then the regional climate model should be able to do a relative good job. So in conclusion, in Africa, integration of process-based evaluation to model development is currently lacking. So we talk about capacity building in terms of training the next generation scientists over the continent. So with these, there's a deliberation whether we should focus more on the young generation acquiring skills in terms of learning how to run the model, or running the simulation here and putting the data out there for people to download and also use for scientific research. And one of the things we raise is that putting model data set available is making the young generation to becoming lazier. So, so we strongly believe partly that there's need for people to go through like the hands-on training. How does this model work? How to run it? And maybe over time, they can also go into the dynamic call to make adjustment or do some sensitivity tests and change some of the schemes. But the reality is that we are lacking in computational resources, high performance compute over the region. Also power, electricity is a problem in some places, for example, in Nigeria, and also internet facility. Of course, UCAR cannot address some of this problem. So at the moment, the best truth is whatever simulation we have from this big collaborative effort, putting the data out there for people to also use for scientific purpose. But we strongly advocate training of young generation, and particularly hands-on, so that they can also run their own simulation. So the last question is, how do we contribute, and what is the role of UCAR, HENCA, and the international community in accelerating environmental sustainability solution in Africa? So one of the points we raise here is a strong need to facilitate collaboration with meteorological agency across the continent, and also for individual countries. So we believe strongly that the Met Agency, who are obligated to process observation, in-situ observation, and also transmit to WMO, that the resources is enormous. So through collaboration, we can have access to these observations, which can be used for research. And also, we emphasize the need to strongly engage stakeholders and asking them, the people over the continent, what do they really want? So most of our research are fundamentals, the why the eggs, hypothesis driven. Some of the information just end up in citation and all that, but not necessarily consumable to the local population. So, and doing that, we might take a step back from the bigger science and providing, for example, climate risk indices that can be used, short to long-term forecasts that are critical for agriculture and hydropower. So we believe that this information might be more essential. In line with that also is we also feel that there's a need for climate assessment report over the continent. So unlike the US, Africa, we don't really have any climate assessment reports. And we believe this can guide in terms of setting priorities of what we should address. So, and we ended our deliberation by potentially proposing African Affinity Group, which can also promote collaboration and also facilitate deeper understanding on the problem facing the continent in climate context. Thank you.
Can you allow me to share my screen? I joined the room, but I don't have access to. Okay, great. Okay. So hi everyone. I'm going to report our discussions for the Land and Water Working Group. So as you can see here. Yeah, so essentially, we put everything in the Google Doc, which I believe will be shared with the community here. So to briefly summarize our discussions and answers to the first question, what are the main achievements for the UCAR and also the community so far in terms of the Africa-related land and water research? So our discussions were around the to provide the current modeling and the data capabilities first from UCAR and communities, which we view this as a major achievement, one of the major achievements so far. So for example, here I'm listing some of the major modeling capabilities we have right now for land and water modeling, including WRF Hydro, NOAA-MP for agriculture irrigation, and CSM, CTSM community terrestrial system model, MPAS with NOAA-MP land model, the middle route river channel model, and also the ICAR, the intermediate complexity atmospheric research model, which is used to downscale all those cause resolution climate models. We also have a lot of data assimilation capabilities, including the high resolution land data assimilation system with NOAA-MP, the radar produced inundation diary, the rapid model, and oh, sorry, this one is from the community. Community capabilities. And for the modeling capabilities from community, we have this FAR DAS. I mentioned that yesterday from the FuseNet land data simulation system supported by NASA. We have this NASA land information system with NOAA-MP land model data simulation. We have this community JEDI, the joint effort for data assimilation infrastructure with NOAA-MP land model. We have the NOAA unified forecast system, which is global. And for the data set, essentially we have currently we have this CGD global climate data guide as a general resource. It summarizes a lot of useful data set can be used globally and also covering the Africa regions. And yesterday, actually mentioned that actually there is a new water quality data under NCAR, but it seems like it's still under development or ongoing. So we hope this can also be used in the future to benefit the community. And also for this data set, resources for community, we have these global data sets covering Africa from all the available remote sensing satellite data set from NASA, for example, and also the European Space Agency. For example, we have Landsat, MODIS, VIRS, PACE, GRACE, CHIRPS, TRIM, you name it, a lot of things, Sentinel-1 and 2 from the ESA, the European Space Agency. And we also have some in situ stream flow data from the Global River Dataset Center, and also some of the other stream flow and the river, the water resource dataset too. Another thing is that we have a lot of resources available in this NASA existing NASA Sphere project for website for East Africa and also globally. So if you check this website, which will be available to the community here later, you will see all those different applications and the data used over Africa for water resources and for drought, flooding, and things like that. The last part of the achievements is that it's because of this workshop, we know that we have a lot of groups working on the same topic here. So we just try. We want to highlight this as an achievement because this is really where people get together to work together. So first, for example, from UCAR NCAR, we have this raw land service model team, the raw of hydro team, the CGD terrestrial system team, and also the raw GIS, the geographic information system team. All these teams are working on the Africa land and water topics. So if I miss anything, please let me know and I will add that to it. And for the community, for example, we have the participants here in this workshop from the Western Michigan universities, Syracuse universities, the CU Boulder, UCLA, NASA, Purdue, the FuseNet related groups, the Climate Hazard Center from UCSB, and also the UCSD groups. So all these are really the achievements we have right now. So more importantly, for the current urgent issues, so we try to summarize this related to the land and water. So first we have this water resource related extreme events, flooding, drought, and this flooding and drought will further affect agriculture and food security, especially under the climate change. We have this land use, land cover change, which includes the desertification, the deforestation over Congo rainforest, and also the wildfires. And this land use, land cover change will further affect the biodiversity, which has been much less understood and also studied. So this is also something we can collaborate with the community to work on in the future. And also related to the land use, land cover change, we have urbanization, urban climate and extremes, and also the human migration due to the water issues. This is really a point raised by the people in our group who is from the native African regions. So they really have these issues. And also the freshwater resources, for example, the inland water bodies, lakes, reservoirs, the transboundary river flows, particularly how this would change under climate change, and also the groundwater. And related to all these water resources, we are also facing the challenges in water rights and infrastructure equity issues, and also the water quality issues. To overcome these obstacles and the resources we need. So essentially for the challenges we have is we have 6 lacks: lack of funding, lack of the measurements, lack of involvement with local African communities, lack of recognition and credit for local African communities. This is especially important in academia because sometimes we can communicate with local Africa scientists, but in writing the papers or the projects, sometimes their names cannot get recognized by the community. And also lack of knowledge of the local conditions, environments, local policies, and cultures, which may hurdle our investigations or the collaborations with local scientists. And also lack of sustained resources and effective methods to maintain the capacities we already built in a long term. So the resources we need to have to support in the future related to these challenges is, so first we need to have sustained funding resources, which have been mentioned by previous speakers already. So something learned from this workshop is, for example, NSF Belmont, US AID, the NASA Sphere projects, and there might be some other resources. So another thing is the funding allocation to US versus Africa, which has been mentioned by Forrest earlier. So how do we most effectively allocate the resources we applied to help the local African scientists to support their activities? In addition, instead of putting everything just to go to the US universities or national labs. We also need more connections, involvement with local African communities and universities, institutions, particularly for those communities who has been experiencing those environmental issues. For example, flood, drought, things like that. We need to talk to them to understand their needs. We also need more educational outreach and networking programs. So currently, as mentioned yesterday, UCAR is already providing some, but we need more, definitely. Related to this, we also need some training and workshops for African scientists and stakeholders provided by people coming to Africa in person. So this has been emphasized yesterday during our discussions. So we really need to bring people together and then to do this more effectively. Something related to this, we may try some strategic scholar exchange program, but this might run into some of the issues when we touch the local policies, cultures, but we need to find some strategic way to do that. And I believe this would also be a good strategy, good way to do. Some potential things to try is, for example, create an international hub program. Like, for example, we already mentioned some of the US universities build the campus in Africa, which provides really a good platform for people to exchange. And also, we can work with or partner with the NGOs and the African private sectors, in addition to the government, to try to seek for funding resources. Some potential partnership with, say, World Bank, African Development Bank, USAID, things like that. And again, we need to learn better about the local cultures and the environmental needs, issues, and people's needs. Okay, so related to all these resources and needs, so how do we contribute? So for our answers to the last question here, so basically we separate these two parts. One is the existing activities, and we should continue, and the other one is the new activities we should propose to do. So for the existing activities, so now we have this, so UCAR is trying to make everything open to the public for the models code and also the data source. So we should leverage this and try to continue to publish the open source model code with detailed documentations and guidance, so that it can help people to learn how to run the model, to use the data. And then UCAR can also work with universities to continue to host workshops, training programs, visiting programs, to invite Africa scholars to come to US, or do some sort of like sending the students to visit us to learn more about the capabilities people need in Africa. The third one is that we already have an Africa Initiative seminar series, so we should invite more Africa scholars to come to give seminars to this in this seminar. And the last part for the existing things we can do is to leverage existing data sources, for example, the CGD Climate Data Guide, to create Africa continent-specific data guides similar to some corners of the continental US resources. So the new activities we want to do, or we need to do, is that first, we should start Africa Affinity Scientific Group. So we learned that yesterday there is already a Africa Affinity Group, but more from social perspective. But now we want to leverage that capabilities and then expand on that so that we can have also Africa Affinity Scientific Group similar to the South America Affinity Group mentioned by Andreas yesterday, so that we can discuss how to share the resources and also create a centralized Africa-related data and model resource sharing platforms. This is really something we can do quickly and very effective to or beneficial to the community. The second one is to explore the ways of UCAR, NCAR, and community contribution to the upcoming Africa geostationary satellite, ground-based, and airborne measurements. All these opportunities, how we can contribute to that. We can explore some of the strategic ways to do that. The third one is to explore the UCAR, NCAR internal funding and also the other agencies funding. I mentioned a few like the NSF ones, the NASA ones, and USAID ones. Then we also need to try to continue this or explore the new ways UCAR, NCAR can contribute to the local African capacity building through some sort of programs. This is really important. And last but not least, we should learn more about learn more from the other existing programs and initiatives. For example, the USAID FuseNet initiatives to learn from their experience and the useful strategies, and then we can adopt that in the Africa studies or Africa initiative here to explore. And yeah, I think how much time do I have? Okay, yeah, lastly, because we don't want to just stay in the discussion stage, so we want to really put something into action. So here we did one step further. We list several things we can do really as an action for short term within 1 year after this workshop, and also long term multiple years. So for the short term ones, as I mentioned, we should create an affinity group and start the communications among the group members for the resource sharing. And we should create a resource sharing platform, centralized platform. We should, so right now, all these mentioned proposal opportunities are open right now. So we should try to connect people together to try these proposals. They are right now open to the public for proposal calls. So we should try this. And also we should start some of the collaborations among individual groups, mostly probably from the connections through this workshop. So some people already contact us about the potential collaboration. I think this is a good starting point. So let's continue the conversations after the workshop and then to really create some meaningful collaborations. And also try to send students from Africa to UCAR, NCAR through the different visiting programs. So for this ASP graduate visit, as we mentioned yesterday, so currently it is only eligible for the people located in US. We cannot send international students there, but we can start with some African American or Africa-based student who is currently learning or pursuing PhD in US to NCAR. And we have these two other potential visiting programs which do not have this constraint. So we can invite international people come. And so we are also discussing the UCAR, NCAR scientists visit to Africa for training, collaboration, discussion, and capacity building. For example, Forrest, Rajesh, and Wenfu went to Africa, Rwanda last year for these training and discussions. So this year they might go there again. For example, Rajesh has the NASA Severe project, so that requires us to closely connect with the local African scientists to push forward this project. So there is an opportunity definitely. And for the long-term ones, first we need to maintaining these short-term actions. We need to seek for sustained funding resources. We also need to aim for some collaborations in or contributions in the geostationary satellite and possible field campaign measurements or even ground-based measurements. So some people mentioned that there are a lot of existing in-situ measurements there, but they just were not well maintained. So how we can get something done to spin up those existing instruments and then continue to maintain that so that people can use the data. And lastly, we should seek for sustained collaboration with local African community and also partnership with the international groups focusing on Africa. So with that, I would like to stop here. Yeah, and all these things I believe will be available to the group here and the community. Yeah, thank you.
I'm not sharing the, it's because it's a little bit messy, but I promise to work on making it clear. But basically, it's going to be actually fast because a lot of things that you all mentioned, it's already what we also discussed. So in our weather session, we had 4 people in person and 3 online. And to the questions, what are the main achievements from UCAR and NCAR and the community so far? We first discuss on current research topics that are ongoing in related to weather in Africa in this group. One is the lining studies in East Africa. There was mentioned also that this group from Maryland University is working, and they also work in International Lining Safety Day workshops yearly. Also, another one topic was the convection studies in the Great Lake region and the lakeland interactions in the Great Lake region. The variability of East African weather, also done with from the work from PNNL, MJO and Easterly African waves in connection to global climate. Organization of convection, that was a topic brought from Addis Ababa group, working on WRF 2-kilometer simulation studying organization of convection in idealized studies over the ocean. Another topic was the African monsoon. But apart from the research topics, there were 2 main things that were brought up, is that the capacity that we have here at NCAR and the UCAR community to build software and tools and models and open source, and they can be used worldwide. And it's not just like bringing the service, but also like the capacity from scratch, so the community can use it freely. One of the examples was the WRF hydro model, which is really important in East Africa nowadays, especially for flash flooding. And this is also work that it's been done in collaboration with ICPAC in Africa. We also had the contribution from Atta Hussein, who was representing WMO, so from the service side. And mostly that work brings early warning and capacity building for severe weather forecasting in high impact weather events in Africa. And that is mostly supported by international partners like the WISER in the UK and the CREUS organization. So what are the urgent environment questions or issues in Africa for our group to be addressed in the weather section? The one that was fast, really fast that we mentioned was the extreme precipitation. And I think that everybody mentioned that already. And the high impact weather events in Eastern Africa, flash flood or severe convection, etc., that is causing a lot of fatalities. And also, what is the impact of land use and land cover changes in these extreme events, and how these will change in future scenarios, especially in the Great Lake regions in the tropics. These also is linked to water cycle changes in the Great Lakes, and how is this changing biodiversity, water quality, and some other topics that have been already mentioned. Also, another topic was the changes also in the Sahel region, dust storms and the Saharan dust storming impacts in global radiative forcing. The droughts, it's a main issue, kind of like a lot of places in the world, but especially also in Africa. And also how to relate or how to work with these climate and weather models and relate them to the health sector, like how to forecast spreading of malaria and other diseases. So from the WMO perspective, the ATA was suggesting that how we can, like as the community, the research community, can we develop additional products like focusing also in urban meteorology, heat waves, heat intensity, and how we can produce indexes and products on wildfire and these issues that we can translate also into the operational arena, like in the National Meteorological and Hydrological Services. And another main topic that was discussed that it would be really a pressing issue to work on was the air mass burning over the Congo. So the third questions were the obstacles when addressing these issues and what are the resources, supports that we need to overcome these obstacles. Well, there's a lack of observations, and for weather that is really important. So that was the main issue brought up that already has been said. One of the examples was the lack of upper air soundings to initialize not just the models in Africa, but the global models, right? So this is like a global issue. And we were questioning what is the main problem with these in undeveloped countries. Like, is it financing? Is the cost of the zones? It is like the maintaining issues like helium sources. So yeah, that was one of the main issues brought up. Also that there is a lack of understanding from the community on what is currently operational right now in Africa and what are the gaps that we have. So we mentioned that we have WMO websites on the global observing system and so on, but sometimes these are not really updated or we don't have the ground-based information. So that was another issue. Of course, lack of computational resources. An example was brought up if they want to extend the WRF hydro studies and couple with atmospheric models, they can just do that like really limited and not really in depth. So that's another issue facing. Another issue is I see that other groups have mentioned that now we're going to have MTG or like the third generation of satellites from EUMETSAT in Africa, but we don't, and we do have a lot of groups here in the US or outside the US working on bringing these capacities for lining studies or for like especially for severe weather monitoring and warning, but we are not really sure on how or if the African Met services or researchers will have the data available to actually work with that. So it's sometimes the not understanding what's available so we can translate these capacities to Africa. Another was brought up as like differentiating in between service provision and the research or the more capacity from the ground, because service provision sometimes is limited. So we want to move forward from that. And that there's no a lot of clear communication between the community research or operational in Africa and outside Africa, and what are the funding venues that we need to go through for different to tackle different scientific questions or technology transfer or knowledge transfer. So how do we contribute, and what is the role of NCAR and UCAR and the international community? Some ideas were brought up. First, it could be good to better advertise, for instance, UCAR, NCAR, or other research lab, US-based research lab, grad and undergrad programs for visitors from the research and academic landscape in Africa to come visit and build in that way the connections and move forward this big initiative. Other thing would be to mirror other training programs from African-based research. Some examples were mentioned like CBC NOAA, that brings African-based researchers to train in NOAA, like for example, Kenya or Uganda. That we should collaborate more with initiatives like EVE. So we move forward to work from silos. also mirroring other general activities like the international community for like the ICTP group in Italy, who is doing a lot of training and a lot of resource. They bring a lot of also research, computational research for training in especially Africa. So maybe partnered up or like communicating with these groups that are already doing some research and capacity building in Africa to mirror these efforts. What else? Yeah, also from WMO was mentioned that there is the educational and outreach units, and they have several training centers in Africa and training opportunities for, especially this is from the operational community and the National Meteorological and Hydrological Services, which is forecasters, stakeholders, aviation sector, agriculture, etc. And the WMO is kind of like the bridge to provide sometimes these trainings on the operational community, but also wants to get more connected with the research community so they can share our research to do this effective research to operations, right? So ideas were brought out, like also connecting with like Chris Davis, who is actually the chair of the World Weather Research Program here in the house. So maybe connecting the research and also the service or operational groups and WMO and probably putting together listening sessions with also African based researchers and forecasters. What else? Oh, and other ideas were given like probably could be a good idea to give a presentation of the outcome of this workshop in the African Monsoon Working Group at Clyburn GWEX. So we can report these results to the community and it's a place to start and to start rolling this ball. And ideas on maybe we could create a database or start a database of researchers based in Africa to speed up connections and also researchers here. Another idea was to also explore the connection with UCP, not just the labs, the research lab, but also the UCAR UCP and the training modules and training people and resources that we can also explore from the house, and maybe find this funding from the NSF Belmont Forum to kind of like build these trainings for Africa. And explore also the AI forecasting connections with CISL Group, because that could also reduce computational resources, and that would be something that Africa researchers were interested to. Also were mentioned maybe other connections like AI for Good in Microsoft Kenya or Google Africa, so maybe exploring also industry partnerships. And then more specifically, there were some ideas to kind of like next items that we could explore is maybe propose a new AMS session on Africa research and also EGU session possible, connect with the World Weather Research Program at WMO, connect with the WMO Region 1 in Africa group of experts, GWEX, the CPC NOAA, and explore NASA funds like the Applied Science Group or RSET is an example, and also explore the WMO education and training resources and connections with that group. So I think that's all. Yep.
All right, we have Felicity here as well. Hi, Felicity. And we're going to go back to the first slide, but since we have everybody in the room and we have Felicity there, one of the things we had mentioned on our first slide as the what was sort of the main achievement. One of the main achievements of this conference was networking and hearing stories from Africa about forecasting processes and about the capacities that they currently have and sort of the support that they are looking to provide. So one of the things we did in our small group, which I think might be useful here, is if Felicity can even just turn her her cam around and show us the forecast office in Ghana, because she kind of gave us a quick little tour of the forecast office in Ghana, which I thought was really interesting. And Felicity, can you chat us through some of the things like you did earlier?
And we cannot hear you.
We can't hear you though.
You might need to change your device, microphone.
You might need to change your microphone, but
Okay.
oh,
Hello.
there you go. We can hear you now.
Yeah. So good evening, everyone. It's 5:47 p.m. in Accra. Welcome to our Central Analysis and Forecasting Office. This is with this we are running ship. So today, my colleagues are on duty. They've just done the chart analysis. This is the projector that we are doing. We pick the model chart from these two pieces that you can see, the synergy with a flash drive or pen drive manually, and then we move it to another PC, this very one, where we do the manual analysis using the PowerPoint, and then we are cool to go. So Debbie is the one on duty today. So he has done the chart, as we can see, being displayed on the PowerPoint. So we do all this thing manually before we do the forecast for the day. And the forecast, this is how it looked like. We have two types. We have the general one as is on now, this very one. And then we now translate it into the graphics, the impact-based forecast, where we do interpret it using the graphical representation. I'll just show you one now, and then we call it that, or I can share my link if it's possible. Okay. Yeah, so you see how we go about it, the archiving of the date, the forecast. So we have to do it manually on our PCs and then copy it into a hard drive. We are trying to see if we can get it stored into the clouds for easy access by every other person. So this is the impact-based forecast, if you can look at it.
Can you pan up a little bit?
Okay.
Yeah, just so we can see that. So there's Ghana.
Graphical representation where we use the color code. Normally, we're supposed to do it for only severe weather events, but then the nature of Ghana, people wait until the system approach before they start looking for the forecast. So one of the innovative way that we have done is to introduce the impact base into our daily forecast. So every 6 hours, we issue the weather update, and every the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we do 1 week, and then the 72-hour forecast. So this one, we call it the weekend forecast, where we give them for today, that's Friday in Ghana, is getting to the evening to the night. Then we do for Saturday and then Sunday. Then we update it on daily basis 3 times every day. So this is what we are doing at the Central Analysis and then Forecasting Office. Then we have these machines here too. It's our server, one of the servers that we have here, but currently it's not being used as it's supposed to be due to 1 or 2 challenges that we may be seeing in our presentation to you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that tour. And so that was one of the things I think was really interesting, was to hear the sort of feedback from the forecasters there in Ghana. And if we go to the next slide, I don't know if we have the main Jamboard, but I'm on Jamboard number 2, which was what are the sort of urgent areas to be addressed. And so there are sort of like ideas we talked about reducing impacts of natural hazards. So the main sort of issues besides, air quality that people talked about earlier, droughts, desertification, the expansion of the desert areas, and sort of extreme weather. And so part of this, of course, things like water scarcity and obviously things like illegal mining and all those things sort of impact the water quality. Now, one of the things that we also mentioned was that in the Upper West region and some regions, particularly in Ghana, these heat waves, have become more extreme, and they actually lead to sort of health impacts and even some loss of life for school children. So having better warning systems for the school systems for when, they need to I guess stay home or change the curriculum or change the timing based on sort of these weather events was another thing that we discussed. Now, in the third slide, we talked about some of the obstacles, and this is kind of where we started to get into some of the details about like what are the obstacles addressing the issues. Some of the obstacles we talked about earlier about, others talked about earlier, things like no balloons or, forecast, automation and dissemination and support for automation of the processes and computing sort of computational equipment and the reliability and having sort of redundant systems put in place so that that can improve and sort of support the forecast team that is there. They have a forecast team there 24/7. So that would really help support the forecast teams. Another point, even though because obviously this is GMET, but Ghana is part of obviously a wider West African network called ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, and weather, of course, doesn't see boundaries. So one of the things that we did talk about was being able to have these sort of regional impacts and regional things. So yes, we're talking in the context of Ghana right now, but we also must look in the context of a wider regional how these obstacles are not just Ghanaian obstacles, but these are wider regional obstacles. Now, when it comes to resources and support, we talked about cell tower based early warning push notifications and the ability to start implementing those. They are doing some of that, but it's not sort of like cell tower based, almost like how we get tornado warnings here or amber alerts here. They also talked about things like training, that would actually help. And I believe there was Felicity mentioned that there was about 5 out of 30 million that have access to these warning systems, but they're trying to expand that to higher penetration of the society to have access to these sort of push notifications that are cell tower and sort of more place-based. And that will allow us to send SMSs based on different prioritizations. Other things that we talked about was things like using, well, right now they're using GFS sort of initialization, but some of these other data gaps and things that we were talking about earlier, others were talking about, of course, would help improve the model. But this is, again, not just for Ghana itself, but for ECOWAS in the region, because, these weather systems, are not bound by borders. So the next thing was, how do we contribute and what's the role UCAR could play? So training, as we talked about earlier, and then what we talked about was also this sort of ECOWAS collaboration, things like LLMs and text-to-speech that can allow for efficient conversion of that information into local languages. And those things could be, one, you have this sort of cell tower that pushes information, and then you geotag to phone numbers, and then you use that information to know which sort of language it should be distributed in. Things like computer systems and process automation and redundancies, I think, is a really important thing. We talked about the 3D printed stations, of course, leveraging UCAR. Obviously, I forgot to mention this before, the A5 being here at NCAR, we can leverage those things, those organizations there to establish and build and deepen the relationships, and not only Ghana but also ECOWAS, because yes, you can do training on WARF, and you can do training on the various different things, but one of the points that Felicity mentioned, and maybe you can talk, Felicity, about the trust being a kind of core component. And that's one thing that we can sort of help with. How do you build trust with respect to, not just training, but, getting better data in terms of more initialization data, vertical data sets. And, that's, I think, is a really important thing. And working with our neighbor countries, our Ghana's neighbor countries. I say ours because I'm from Ghana too.
Yeah. Yes, I think with Africa, with everything up there, you could say that we are far, far behind. But then the forecast accuracy is key to the Ghanaian society, likewise to our neighboring countries, sister countries. And now, when we started with the TV and the radio, but then it gets to a point they stop broadcasting the forecast. You prepare the forecast, you send it to them, but then they will not show it until the storm comes before they start broadcasting the information that we sent to them earlier. Then it becomes a lot of problems. So on our own, we have to come in, use the social media handles, and be able to send the forecast across using the WhatsApp, the Facebook, the Twitter, and then the Instagram. Then what we also did was to make sure that the forecast is accurate. So we are doing a little bit of a manual forecast validation, and then building the trust into the Ghanaian society. Last year, we had almost like 20 organizations that requested for our forecast before they plan their activity, something that is not common. Even the national will have a program, they will not even contact us. But African Games is ongoing, and they requested for forecasts 2 years before that time, and then they keep asking for updates. Just yesterday, and a bank in Ghana have a program. On Monday, they requested, and yesterday they called in the morning for confirmation if the forecast remain the same or there will be a change. And this is where we are having a challenge, because we don't have much of the equipment that we need. For instance, when it comes to the computers that we normally use. This morning, for the morning forecast to go, it has to delay because the PC slowed down, the internet also slowed down, and we couldn't send the warning because a storm was approaching. The forecaster on DD couldn't send the warning on time. And so these are some of the challenges that we are facing, and we want to bridge that gap so that everybody will get the forecast accurately.
Excellent. Thank you. And so now if we go to, where's that one? So yeah, so then the other thing that we were looking at in terms of, so those are sort of some of the bigger sort of obstacles. And these are some of the things that UCAR and partnering with GMET, with regional ECOWAS wider communities can help coordinate a response or coordinate sustainable solutions. And this is not only at a programmatic level, at a sort of like researcher to, agency level, but then lastly at the community level. And that is when we talked about the 3D printed weather stations, is not just putting weather stations in place, but also developing the core skills and capabilities and knowledge for the community to change, adapt, and build and grow their own organic mesoscale mesonets, IoT mesonets. And that also sort of spins off other sort of skills. If people know Arduino and know how to put these microcontrollers and sensors together, they can start looking at other problems that they have. One example is we did a program in Howard, and they saw the rain gauge looked like a it was an optical rain gauge. People saw that and was like, ooh, that kind of looks like a surveillance piece of kit. So we want to change the look of that and the way your air quality station looks so that it blends in more with the way, things look. So they came up with a new design. They designed a birdhouse looking a thing that the students came up with, and they put that out in the community. So that something like that is an example. Hawaii, for the fires, after the fires, they wanted to have things. So they came up with a nice design, one a backpack one, so they can walk around and collect air quality. But then they also designed it with some traditional Hawaiian sort of themed, you know, design, so that it sort of blends in more with the systems there. And that was another thing that we're looking to do. So these are a lot, I believe, are some of the skills and expertise that NCAR has, and it's really about developing those collaborations and coordination, not only coordination at the ECOWAS level, that's one thing, but we're also siloed here in the US, and our agency responds to those things. So if we could, you know, leverage the relationships and the, you know, experiences that various folks have within our organizations. For example, you have Tomorrow Now, you have, you know, 3D Pause, you have IoTWX, you have, you know, Sizzle. Like if we can sort of manage and sort of coordinate those efforts and leverage the experiences that folks have in these areas, then that would make things, of course, streamline things. And this goes for anywhere you go. I mean, if we were looking at, you know, South America, we have people here from South America that could probably tell us a thing or two about South American issues. And so it's the same sort of thing about Africa. And that's one reason I added making sure that we leverage the African and African American affinity group that we have here at NCAR, so that when we're interfacing with researchers in Africa, they can see that we can also leverage the experience and expertise and, you know, cultural connections that we have here within the NCAR UCAR community. Because the last point I'll also mention is UCAR it's a university consortium of atmospheric research. There are member universities from HBCUs and from MSIs that also do have, you know, diaspora Africans working within the UCAR community. That's not just sitting here at NCAR, but also within the member universities. And that's something else that we can leverage along with the students here. So I believe that we are up on time. And Felicity, if you had anything else to add before we wrap up? You're on mute.
Just to add up that, yes, we faces a range of environmental issues that require urgent attention and action. And for us to address these challenges will require coordinated efforts at local, national, regional, and international levels to promote sustainable development, to protect the ecosystem, and enhance resilience to climate change impact. And then we expect the UCAR to play a crucial role in solving the climatic problems in Africa through your research initiatives, collaborations with the local partners, and then building the capacities through your capacity building program. So this is what I can also add up, and then we look forward to that.
Excellent. Thank you, Felicity, and thank everyone for your attention.
Thank you.